Lyra moved like a whisper beneath the glowing canopy of Xiron, her pale violet skin marked with faint silver marbling that shifted with the filtered light above. The air was heavy here, thick with pollen, damp earth, and the strange metallic tang of unseen minerals. She was the daughter of a long lineage of canopy hunters, her steps honed to silence over a lifetime. Even the smallest sound, a bent frond, a snapped root, was as loud as a scream to her ears. Her mission was clear: find and kill the striped demon beast that had made its lair too close to the sylvan boughs, and along with it, the strange off-worlder who had chosen to live at its side. The elders called the creature Nyrax, an ancient word meaning soul-taker. The beast's presence had driven the game away, leaving her people hungry and restless. Hunters who ventured too near simply disappeared. This wasn't a disturbance, it was a threat to their survival. She had tracked the Nyrax for days, studying the great six-toed impressions it left in the mossy floor. Oddly, the human steps beside them were light, almost apologetic, as if he belonged here in a way no outsider ever should. When she crested a ridge overgrown with phosphorescent fungi, Lyra froze. In the small clearing below, reality twisted. The Nyrax lay there, larger than any story had dared describe, its massive body coiled, 6 powerful legs tucked beneath it, white stripes flashing faintly against its black pelt whenever the canopy light shifted. 2 long saber teeth curved like ivory scythes from its upper jaw. It was asleep, its chest rising and falling in a rhythm that made the ground hum. But the human was worse. He sat casually against the beast's flank, cleaning a small metallic device with quiet focus. His weathered clothes, soft, earth-toned fabric, looked dull against the riot of the jungle's colors. His sun-browned hair caught the stray shafts of light, a jarring reminder of how alien he was here. Lyra's stomach tightened. This was no dark sorcerer with a monster on a chain. This was something stranger. She slid an arrow from her quiver, its plasma tip glowing with a restrained hum. The bow's smooth wood felt steady in her grip as she drew, aiming for the Nyrax's eye. A silent kill, and her people would be safe. The beast's eyes snapped open. They weren't the dead void she'd imagined, but a startling, intelligent blue, glowing faintly even in the dim light. The snarl that followed wasn't a sound, it was a force, a wave of low vibration that crawled up her bones and froze her in place. The insects fell silent. The air chilled. Death had found her, and it wore stripes of night and snow. Before she could loose the shot, the human reached up and placed his hand on the Nyrax's head. "Easy, Nyrax," he murmured, his voice a calm, low rumble. The beast's growl faded into a deep, unsettling purr. He turned his gaze toward her, his hazel eyes warm despite the lethal scene. "He won't bite," he said simply, as if such words could undo generations of fear. Lyra kept her arrow trained on the beast. "You will leave this territory. You and your demon." "He's not a demon," the human said, tilting his head slightly. "He's a predator. And he's not mine, I'm a xenobiologist. I'm here to study him." "Study?" she scoffed, her grip tightening. "My people starve because of him." His gaze flicked toward her bow. "Then I'd appreciate it if you stopped pointing that thing at me." "He doesn't like it." For a moment, her training screamed at her to release the arrow. But something in his tone, calm without arrogance, made her hesitate. Reluctantly, she lowered the bow, though she kept the arrow nocked. The human, Kale, gestured toward a small campfire. "You're hungry. I was about to make dinner. I've got more than enough. I do not take food from outsiders." "It's not a trick," he said, lifting his hands. "Just food. You stay over there, I'll stay here. We eat, we talk, the big guy sleeps. When we're done, you can go back to plotting how to kill us." Her stomach betrayed her with a hollow ache. She moved to the far side of the clearing and crouched low, bow resting across her knees, never taking her eyes off him. Kale moved with the quiet economy of someone who had done this many times before. He roasted slices of some alien root vegetable over the fire and seared strips of preserved meat in a pan. The scent was rich and unfamiliar, making her mouth water despite herself. When he slid a metal plate toward her, she took it without a word. They ate in tense silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire, the hum of the forest, and the steady breathing of the Nyrax. For the next 3 cycles, she shadowed them from the high branches. She learned Kale's routines. How he rose with the canopy's glow, how he tended to the Nyrax with gentle precision, removing venomous thorns from its paws or brushing its thick pelt. She watched him toss a hardened leather ball for the beast to fetch, the predator's saber teeth carefully avoiding the toy. Lyra had always believed strength was measured in the crack of a bowstring or the final stillness of prey. Kale's strength was different, quiet, patient, and deeply dangerous in its own way. On the 3rd night, the jungle erupted in chaos. A pack of scarhounds, lean, hyena-like scavengers with hooked claws and needle-sharp teeth, swarmed the clearing, driven mad by hunger. Nyrax surged to his feet with a roar, meeting the attack in a blur of claws and muscle. Kale moved with precision, firing his rifle in sharp bursts to protect the beast's flanks. It wasn't her fight. And yet, when one of the scarhounds slipped past them and lunged for Kale's unprotected back, she loosed an arrow without thinking. The predator crumpled mid-leap. When the last of the attackers fled, Nyrax was bleeding, a deep, jagged wound in his side. "The claws are poisoned," she said, stepping into the clearing. "He'll be dead by sunrise without a cure." Kale's composure cracked. "What do I do?" "There's a root," she said. "Moon petal. It grows behind the weeping falls. But we must be fast." Together, they plunged into the dark. The jungle swallowed them whole. Lyra led with the effortless grace of a canopy-born hunter, her violet skin a flicker among the phosphorescent fronds. Kale followed close, carrying a torch that cast trembling shadows over the vines and moss. Somewhere behind them, Nyrax's labored breathing still echoed in Kale's mind, each ragged exhale a ticking clock. The sound of the weeping falls grew from a whisper to a constant roar. Mist clung to Lyra's hair and lashes as she ducked behind a curtain of glowing water. There, tucked in the black soil at the base of the stone wall, grew the moon petal root, a pale, bioluminescent coil that glowed like something alive. Lyra dropped to one knee, fingers deftly freeing the root without damaging it. "This will slow the poison. But it's not enough alone." "That's my part," Kale said, taking the root and slipping it into his portable synthesizer. The device whirred, scanning and isolating its compounds. They hurried back, Kale balancing the heavy torch while Lyra cleared a path with the speed of someone who had run this jungle her entire life. When they reached Nyrax, the beast lay on his side, chest heaving, white stripes dulled with pain. Kale knelt at his friend's flank. "Hey, big guy. We've got you." His voice was rough, shaking at the edges. He fed the moon petal's data into his medkit, the machine's soft chime signaling that the antivenom was synthesizing. Lyra worked beside him, pressing mosses and leaves into the wound to staunch the bleeding. Her hands moved with sure, practiced knowledge, the kind passed down from hunter to hunter. For the first time since meeting him, she noticed Kale's hands shaking, not with fear for himself, but for the creature that could end him in a heartbeat. When the injection was ready, Kale met her eyes. "He's going to fight it. I'll hold him." Nyrax's body convulsed when the needle pierced his muscle. The beast's roar shook the clearing, massive head thrashing. Lyra threw herself across his neck, gripping the coarse fur and whispering ancient Sylvan chants into his ear. The vibrations of his pain traveled through her chest and bones, but she held firm. Kale's gaze met hers over the beast's heaving form. There was no barrier between them now, no hunter and prey, no outsider and local, only two people anchored by the same desperate will to save this life. The thrashing slowed. Nyrax's breathing evened, his massive body sagging back into the ground. Lyra eased her hold but stayed close, murmuring softly until the beast's eyes closed again. They both collapsed where they were, blood and medicinal paste smeared across their clothes. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged. The jungle's nocturnal chorus returned in hesitant threads, and the fire crackled low. Kale sat close enough for his knee to touch hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved both of us tonight." Lyra's instinct was to dismiss the words, but something about the way he said them, soft, without expectation, made her hold them instead. "You are strange, Kale of Earth," she murmured. "You love a predator. You show kindness to an enemy." "Fong's not a monster," he said, slipping into the old name before catching himself. "Nyrax. And I've never seen you as an enemy." She didn't answer. Her eyes wandered over his face, noting the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, the faint scar on his jaw. The firelight made him look less alien, less apart from her world. He began speaking of Earth, oceans that spanned horizons, white fields of frozen water, rain that struck the ground in hard, cleansing sheets. His words painted colors and textures she could barely imagine. In turn, she told him of the canopy winds, the wild joy of leaping between branches, the constant shadow of hunger, and the isolation of being the strongest. She had never said these things aloud to anyone. "You're not weak," she found herself saying. "Your gentleness is a different kind of strength." "It's the only kind that matters," he replied. The space between them narrowed. His hand lifted to brush a strand of her hair from her face. The touch was tentative, reverent, and when she didn't pull away, it lingered. She leaned in, eyes closing, and his lips found hers, not with conquest, but with an unsteady longing that matched her own. It was a kiss that left no part of her unchanged. Morning light spilled across the clearing. They were tangled beside the sleeping Nyrax when the sharp command shattered the stillness. "Lyra. Step away from the beast." She was on her feet instantly, bow in hand. A line of sylvan hunters emerged, weapons raised, their leader, an elder with eyes like flint, at their front. "The human has bewitched you," the elder said. "You were sent to end this threat, not lie with it." Kale stepped in front of her, his voice low. "She's not my prisoner. And your fight isn't with her." He gestured to Nyrax. "It's with anyone who thinks this is a monster." Before the elder could reply, the jungle exploded with white light and concussive sound. Poachers. Figures in scarred armor burst from the foliage, their pulse rifles tearing into the trees. Sylvan hunters fell under the barrage, their arrows useless against shields. The elder crumpled beside them, a look of stunned disbelief frozen on his face. Kale grabbed Lyra's arm. "Get Nyrax, go." They plunged into the undergrowth, the Nyrax staggering after them despite his fresh wound. Behind them, the sounds of slaughter faded into the roar of pursuit. Now they were prey. They ran until the air burned in their lungs. Lyra took the lead, her movements a blur through the jungle's lattice of roots and vines. Kale stayed close, his heavier frame crashing through foliage, while Nyrax limped behind, the black and white stripes of his coat ghosting in and out of the shadows. The sound of pulse fire echoed through the canopy. The poachers didn't move like hunters, they moved like an army, sweeping the jungle with mechanical precision. "They're using thermal scanners," Kale panted when they stopped in the hollow of a fossilized tree. He pulled a small device from his belt, its screen showing a flicker of movement in the distance. Encrypted comms. Professional, but sloppy. Lyra peered through a narrow gap in the trunk, watching the glint of armor through the undergrowth. "They don't know the forest. But they have more firepower than we can match." Her gaze fell to Nyrax, collapsed on a bed of moss, sides heaving. The beast's eyes, dulled by exhaustion, met hers with something she'd never seen in them before, trust. We can't outrun them, Kale said. We turn this into our ground. Lyra's eyes narrowed. The serpent's spine. A bottleneck? She nodded. A narrow ridge with a drop on both sides. They can't bring their numbers to bear. Kale was already unpacking his gear, coiled wires, a power cell, a survey beacon. I can rig this to overload their comms. 10 seconds of chaos. That's all we'll get. Lyra's jaw tightened. I'll give you that time. They moved again, her path a winding snare of false trails and sudden turns, every step meant to confuse their pursuers. Kale worked on his device even as he ran, fingers moving with a surgeon's precision. Before climbing toward the ridge, they hid Nyrax in a cave thick with moss. Kale crouched before him, pressing his hand to the beast's broad head. Stay. We'll come back for you. The Nyrax's deep rumble followed them as they climbed, a low sound that was half warning, half reluctant obedience. The serpent's spine was a blade of rock jutting above the canopy, slick with moss and barely wide enough for two to walk abreast. On either side, mist shrouded a drop so far the forest floor was invisible. Your knife, Lyra whispered. Kale handed over a carbon steel blade without hesitation. She sliced through the thick vines that held a half-rotten trunk precariously above the path, leaving just enough to keep it suspended until she chose otherwise. Kale wedged his modified beacon into a crack in the rock. When I hit this, we've got 10 seconds to make them wish they never came here. The first two poachers strode into view, their heavy boots clanging against the stone. Lyra faded into the rock's shadow, Kale crouched low behind a jut of stone, rifle ready. Now, Kale breathed into his calm. He tapped a command on his wrist unit, and an invisible wave of energy rippled outward. Through the hacked channel, Kale heard the burst of static, the curse-laced confusion as helmet displays glitched. In that window of disarray, Lyra struck, a plasma arrow slicing clean through the neck joint of the lead poacher's armor. Kale's rifle spat controlled bursts, forcing the second soldier to take cover. More poured onto the ridge, but the path was too narrow. Lyra's blade cut the last vine. The suspended trunk swung down with lethal force, sweeping three poachers screaming into the mist. The fight turned into a deadly rhythm, Kale's steady suppressive fire guiding enemies into Lyra's path, her movements like liquid shadow as she exploited every weakness in their armor. They drove the surviving poachers back toward a small clearing where their ship waited. The leader, a hulking four-armed brute, activated the ramp and leveled a heavy repeater at them. You've cost me a fortune, his voice snarled through the helmet speaker. Now you die. Energy bolts tore chunks from the ridge, forcing them into cover. Lyra's eyes flicked upward, a tree overhanging the ramp. She climbed swiftly, positioning herself for a clear shot. She never saw the second poacher step from the hatch. The blast tore the tree beside her into splinters, throwing her onto the ramp. Her bow clattered away. The brute loomed, weapon aimed at her face. A roar split the clearing. Nyrax. The beast burst from the tree lean, a storm of black and white muscle. He slammed into the brute, sending him sprawling, and planted a massive paw on his chest. The growl that followed was a promise of death. The remaining poachers froze, watching their leader pinned beneath the predator they had come to claim. One by one, weapons clattered to the ground. From the jungle's edge, the surviving Sylvan hunters emerged, their elder leaning heavily on a spear. They took in the scene, the beast shielding Lyra, Kale kneeling at her side, and something shifted in their eyes. The old fear cracked. The silence after the battle was heavier than the fight itself. Steam rose from the scorched ground, mingling with the scent of burned moss and blood. Nyrax stood like a statue over the pinned poacher leader, his intelligent blue eyes locked on the enemy's visor. The elder limped forward, his gaze moving from the beast to Kale, then to Lyra. The disapproval she had expected was absent. Instead, there was something older, recognition, perhaps even respect. Kale rose slowly, keeping one hand on Lyra's shoulder. They came to kill him. They'd have destroyed everything in their path. The elder's voice was quiet but carried to every ear. We were wrong. The Soul Taker is not a curse. He is a guardian. By dusk, the surviving poachers were bound with their own restraints, their ship disabled. A covenant was spoken aloud beneath the glowing canopy. The Sylvan would become protectors of the Nyrax, not their hunters. Humanity's strange empathy, once doubted, was now woven into the jungle's future. That night, Lyra and Kale sat by the fire with Nyrax sprawled nearby. The beast's sides rose and fell in slow, steady rhythm. The fear she had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective love. She looked at Kale and knew her own hunt had ended, not in victory over a monster, but in finding a partner who saw the same truth she did. 5 cycles passed, and the jungle's song changed. Where silence and fear had once ruled, curiosity now thrived. Lyra stood on a woven platform high in the canopy, watching a group of young Sylvan sketch a female Nyrax and her cubs in a sunlit clearing. No one hid. No one ran. The sketches were part of a new teaching, learning the beast's language, their moods, their lives. Footsteps approached from behind, quiet but familiar. They're getting good, Kale said, wrapping his arms around her. He wore Sylvan leathers now, blended with Terran gear. The man who had once been a solitary researcher was now co-director of the Lyra Kale Interspecies Research Institute, a living collaboration between their worlds. You taught them to see, she murmured. He smiled into her hair. You gave them something worth seeing. Nyrax's pack still roamed the northern ridges, older now but stronger than any on record. Lyra herself commanded the Thra Guardians, warriors trained not to kill, but to defend the balance they had fought for. One evening in their home, a Sylvan living pod reinforced with Terran tech, Kale set down a datapad and looked at her differently. She crossed to him, taking his hand and placing it against her stomach. Our own ecosystem is expanding, she said softly. He froze, eyes widening. Are you? I am. The healers confirmed it today. A child. A being of 2 worlds. Kale's breath left him in a rush as he dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to her. They'll be ours, she whispered. The first of a new song. Word of their work reached beyond Zyron. The Terran Federation offered Kale a full pardon and endless funding to return for study, calling him an anomaly. He refused without hesitation. I'm not a unit. I'm home. One night, Lyra visited the Elder Keeper of Songs. The great tapestry of Sylvan history now held a new section, Nyrax, the human, and the huntress with the lowered bow. The children ask for this story more than any other, the elder said. It teaches that the greatest strength is in the hand offered in peace. Later, Kale and Lyra stood on their platform, watching the twin sun set. Far below, a familiar shape emerged at the forest's edge. Nyrax, silvered by the fading light, lifted his head and let out a low, rumbling call, a greeting, not a challenge. Years blurred. Their daughter, skin violet like her mother's but with Kale's curious hazel eyes, stood at the edge of a clearing watching a Nyrax cub. The little predator gave a playful snarl, and the girl stepped forward, palm open. He won't bite, she whispered. Lyra's chest tightened as Kale's arm came around her. In their daughter's voice, she heard the echo of their first meeting, the beginning of the covenant, the promise fulfilled. The jungle would carry that song long after they were gone. And that's how one hunt turned into a history. From a mission to kill a beast, to a love that rewrote the laws of 2 worlds, Lyra and Kale's story is proof that the lines between monster and protector are not drawn in teeth or claws, they're drawn in understanding. Nyrax, once the terror of the canopy, became the heartbeat of a new alliance. In time, the Sylvan and the Nyrax thrived together. The poachers never returned, not just because of fear, but because the jungle itself had changed. Its guardians no longer saw predators as trophies, but as kin. The Institute grew into a model for the galaxy, teaching that empathy is not weakness, but the sharpest tool any protector can wield. Kale and Lyra's daughter would grow up fluent in two cultures, just as comfortable in the high branches as on the jungle floor, just as quick to extend a hand in peace as to draw a bow when needed. Her first lesson was the same one her parents had learned: the fiercest battles are not won by destroying what you fear, but by learning to stand beside it. If this story moved you, imagine what could happen if we brought a little of that courage and understanding into our own world. So if you want more tales like this, of wild worlds, impossible bonds, and the truths hidden in the space between, subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear that even the most feared creatures can become allies. Let's keep building bridges, one story at a time.